In the sealed metropolis of Erthos, the air itself was a toxin. Humanity existed only within the sterile confines of the towers, great metallic spires that pierced the perpetual gray smog. Life was governed by efficiency, and efficiency was governed by the mandate. 8 hours of work, 8 hours of leisure, 8 hours of syncope. Syncope was not sleep. It was a state of metabolic suspension enforced by the Tower Authority designed to conserve resources in a dying world. Citizens would step into their personal pods at 2200 sharp, the polished white door hissing shut, and the cold mist would claim them. They would emerge precisely at 0600, refreshed and ready to serve the collective. Time in Erthos was a closed loop, perfectly managed, until it wasn't. For Elara Kay, worker 734 Alpha, the loop fractured. She sealed her pod door on Tuesday, her mind weary from the humming repetition of the factory line. She braced for the familiar chilling descent into nothingness. The pod door hissed open. The ambient light of her apartment felt wrong. The digital clock on her wall read 0600. But the date, stark and unforgiving, declared it was Saturday. Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, gone. 72 hours had vanished, consumed by the silent cold mist of the pod. She had lost time. Or she was beginning to fear something else had found it. The pod door retracted with a soft hydraulic sigh. 0600. The light in Elara Kay's dwelling module was exactly as she had left it, a sterile, low-wattage glow that kept the shadows at bay. But the air felt wrong. It was still, stale, and carried the faint chemical tang of the syncope mist. 72 hours. The number echoed in her mind, a dissonant chord against the quiet hum of the tower's life support systems. She stood motionless for a full minute, her factory-issued gray uniform feeling stiff on her skin. She had lost 3 full rotations. She took a step, and the wrongness began to coalesce. It was her apartment, Module 734 Alpha, but it had been edited. Her small hydro plant, a struggling vine she'd named Stubbs, had always drooped by the nutrient dispenser. It was now on the sill of the sealed window, angled perfectly toward the filtered light that bled through the smog. It looked healthier. Her reading chair, usually askew, was now perpendicular to her small data terminal, a position of optimized efficiency, not comfort. She ran a finger along the terminal's screen. It was dark, but the surface was clean. She never cleaned the screen. A quiet dread, cold and sharp, began to prickle at the base of her skull. She moved to the nutrient cabinet. She was a creature of habit, subsisting on the standard F nutrient paste. It was cheap, gray, and tasted of processed minerals. She had purchased a month's supply, as she always did. But her cabinet was not filled with standard F. It was stocked neatly with 3 rows of Opti Nutrient Plus citrus blend. Elora's breath hitched. Opti Nutrient Plus was premium. It was what the floor supervisors ate. It cost 30% more credits. She checked her account on the terminal. Her balance was stable, but the charge was there, logged on Wednesday at 1947, a time when she should have been deep in syncope. A glitch, she told herself, her heart hammering against her ribs. The pod malfunctioned. I woke up. I bought better food. I cleaned. But she didn't remember. She didn't remember the taste of citrus. She didn't remember moving Stubbs. She remembered only the hiss of the pod on Tuesday and the hiss of its opening on Saturday. She forced herself into the routine. She consumed the nutrient paste. It was, distressingly, delicious. The corridor outside her module was quiet, the air scrubbed and recycled. As she walked toward the transport lift, Jonas from 731 Alpha exited his own module. Jonas was a quiet man, pale and burdened. For 2 years, their interactions had been limited to the briefest, most awkward of nods. This morning, Jonas looked up and smiled, a wide, genuine smile. "Elara," he said, his voice surprisingly warm. "That was a brilliant observation last night." "Last night?" About the humidity regulators, he said, falling into step beside her. How they're dissynced with the primary filtration cycle. I never thought of it. It's causing the excess condensation in the North Passage. Brilliant. She stared at him, her mind a perfect cold blank. I'm glad it was helpful. Helpful? You probably saved the Authority 1,000 credits in maintenance. And that joke you made about the tower manager and the nutrient synthesizer? I haven't laughed that hard in a cycle. I'll see you at the shift break. He walked ahead, leaving Elara standing by the lift, her blood turning to ice. She didn't know anything about humidity regulators, and she certainly didn't make jokes. The factory floor was worse. It was a place of noise, repetition, and anonymity. Elara was a microfitter, assembling data conduits. Her work was precise and dull, and she was mediocre at it. Her quota was her only god, and she met it exactly, every day. No more, no less. But as she approached her station, her line supervisor, a severe woman named Rhea, looked up from her data slate. Rhea never looked up. "Kay," she said. It was the first time in a year the supervisor had used her name instead of her designation. "Your optimization file on the conduit seals, it's already been flagged by Central." "My file?" "The one you filed on Thursday. The one about bypassing the redundant diagnostic check on the Series 4 conduits. It's efficient." The word sounded strange in Rhea's mouth, almost like a compliment. "You've been overperforming your quota all week." "I have?" The supervisor's gaze hardened, mistaking Elara's shock for arrogance. "Don't get complacent. Maintain the new standard." She sat at her station, the familiar components feeling alien in her hands. Her hands, she noted, looked cleaner than she remembered. Her nails were perfectly filed. She waited until the shift bell signaled the first high-stress cycle, when the noise of the machinery would cover the sound of her queries. With trembling fingers, she logged into her terminal. She pulled up her work logs for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. The data stared back at her, cold and absolute. Quota met, 132%. Quota met, 128%. Quota met, 134%. She dug deeper. She found the report Rhea mentioned. It was a 2-page file, written in sparse technical language. It was brilliant. It identified a system redundancy that Elara, the real Elara, had vaguely noticed months ago, but lacked the energy or the confidence to pursue. This file pursued it, articulated it, and solved it. It was digitally signed by Elara Kay, 734 Alpha. She looked at her work log for the missing 3 days. She had taken her breaks exactly on time. She had interacted with coworkers, logging shared data with 3 separate colleagues she usually avoided. She had even, on Wednesday, logged a positive social review of the new nutrient paste in the Tower Forum. Something had worn her life. It had slept in her bed, ate her food, and walked the halls of the factory. And in 72 hours, it had done something Elara herself had never managed to do. It had made her life better. The factory shift ended. The klaxon, a sound Elara usually welcomed as a release, now felt like a starting pistol. She didn't return to her module. She didn't trust it. She didn't trust the citrus-flavored paste or the healthy-looking plant. She was an alien in her own home, a ghost trapped in a life that was improving without her. Fear was a cold, solid weight in her gut, but beneath the fear, a thread of anger was forming. This wasn't a glitch. A glitch didn't make friends for you. A glitch didn't earn you a commendation. She took the transport lift down, not up. She went to level 4, Tower Authority. The Authority's processing center was vast, white, and silent. The air hummed with the sound of unseen filtration. Unlike the factory, there was no grime here. Unlike the residential modules, there was no pretense of comfort. It was a place of pure function. A single attendant, a pale woman who looked as if she'd been grown in the same sterile light, sat behind a white desk. She didn't look up when Elara approached. Designation? The attendant said, her voice a monotone. Elara Kay, 734 Alpha. I need to report a Syncope pod malfunction. The attendant's fingers grazed her terminal. Pod errors are logged automatically for maintenance. This wasn't an automatic log, Elara insisted, her voice trembling slightly. I lost time, 72 hours. For the first time, the attendant looked up. Her eyes were a flat, neutral gray. Losing time is the function of Syncope, 734 Alpha. I lost 3 days, Elara said louder now. I went in on Tuesday, I came out on Saturday. I need to see the tower manager. The attendant's gaze held for a moment too long, a flicker of something. Not surprise, calculation. She returned to her terminal. The tower manager will see you, Bay 12. The tower manager was a man named Cylon. He occupied a small glass-walled office that overlooked the processing center. He was compact, neat, and wore the dark gray uniform of a mid-level administrator. He offered Elara a seat with a gesture that was polite but held no warmth. Designation 734 Alpha, Elara Kay. You are reporting a temporal anomaly regarding your Syncope pod. Yes, Elara said, clutching her hands in her lap. I was suspended for 72 hours, not 8, and in that time, the manager held up his hand. I have your pod's log right here. He turned the screen slightly, though it was too far for her to read. Yes, I see the anomaly. We had a localized grid desynchronization on Tuesday. Several pods in your sector were affected. Yours, it seems, remained in suspension until the grid fully reset this morning, a standard temporal sync error. He smiled, a tight, practiced expression. A rare, but documented occurrence. I assure you, all your vitals were monitored. You were perfectly safe. The system is optimal. Elara stared at him. Safe? I lost 3 days of my life. A regrettable necessity of the system, the manager said, his smile not wavering. The desync required a full diagnostic before we could safely reinitiate the wake cycle. We have, of course, credited your account for the lost work shifts. That's not what I mean, Elara whispered. Something was at my job. The manager's face became a mask of perfect, bland neutrality. His eyes, which had been focused on her, now seemed to be looking just past her left ear. I understand, he said, his voice flattening, losing its previous modulated pleasantness. Pod-induced temporal displacement can cause vivid dream state artifacts, a sense of false memories. It is a known variable. It wasn't a dream. My apartment is different. My plant is different. The system is optimal, the manager said. It was not an answer. It was a statement disconnected from her query. But you're not listening, Elara pleaded. Someone was me. Temporal sync errors are a known and managed variable, he recited as if reading from an invisible script. His blinking, Elara noticed, had become regular. Blink, pause, blink. We will schedule your pod for diagnostic maintenance to ensure stability. Your recent productivity, 734 Alpha, has been noted and commended. Your optimization file was excellent. Continue the good work. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. He hadn't heard a word she said, or rather, he had only heard what the system allowed him to hear. Elara left the office, her legs unsteady. The processing center seemed louder now, the hum of the filtration, a suffocating roar. It wasn't a glitch. The manager wasn't a man lying to her. He was a machine, a spokesperson for the tower, running a program designed to smooth over the cracks. And the cracks were getting wider, threatening to swallow her whole.
Elara did not return to her module that night. She couldn't. The thought of sealing herself inside the white pod, the source of her erasure, was impossible. She rode the transport lifts, a ghost in the tower's circulatory system, watching the shifts change. She saw the 2200 curfew when the halls emptied as the city prepared for the collective, mandatory void of Syncope. She hid in a sanitation alcove, her body vibrating with exhaustion, adrenaline, and a sick resentment. She was terrified of the pod, but as the hours ticked by, a new, more insidious fear emerged. She was terrified of the replacement. The entity that had worn her life, it hadn't just managed, it had excelled. She was Elara Kay, mediocre, shy, inefficient, a worker who met her quota and faded into the recycled air. The replacement was Elara Kay 2.0, efficient, confident, optimized. The tower manager's final words haunted her. Your optimization file was excellent. Continue the good work. The tower liked the replacement. When the 0600 lift whistle chimed, signaling the start of the new rotation, Elara emerged from her hiding place. She was haggard, her uniform rumpled, her mind fractured. She had not undergone syncope. In Arthos, this was a minor crime, a disruption of the sacred balance of resources. She felt the stares of the other, freshly rested workers as she joined the throng moving toward the factory. They were sleek and calm, their minds wiped clean by the mist. She was a jagged edge. She found herself walking behind Jonas, her neighbor from 731 Alpha. He glanced at her, his warm demeanor from the previous day evaporating. He frowned, taking in her appearance. "Rough syncope, Elara?" he asked, his voice laced with a subtle disapproval. "Something like that?" she muttered. "Well," he said, turning away, "try to get your cycle aligned. We're all depending on the grid." The brief, impossible connection that the replacement had forged was already severed. Jonas didn't want her. He wanted the charming, witty, observant Elara from last night, an Elara who didn't exist. The true horror began when she reached her station. Supervisor Rhea was waiting. "You're 0.4 minutes late, Kay," Rhea snapped. But her eyes weren't just angry, they were confused. "Your performance yesterday was substandard. Back to your old numbers." I was tired," she stammered. "Unacceptable. Your efficiency spike on Wednesday and Thursday set a new benchmark. The system has updated its projections for this line. You are now expected to maintain 130%. Elara looked at the components, her hands feeling clumsy, thick, and slow. 130%? She had barely managed 100% on our best days. The replacement hadn't just done her job, it had rewritten the rules. It had made her own life impossible for her to live. She tried. She forced her fingers to move, to twist the micro-fittings, to seal the conduits. But her mind was elsewhere. It was on the citrus-flavored paste. It was on the perfectly angled plant. It was on the joke about the nutrient synthesizer. At the first break, she checked her terminal, her hands clammy. She accessed the tower's social form, the one she never used. She found her own profile. Elara Kay, 734 Alpha. During the 72-hour gap, the replacement had been busy. It had posted 3 times. The first was the nutrient paste review. The Opti-Nutrient Plus citrus blend not only exceeds caloric efficiency by 4%, but provides a tangible morale boost, a worthy investment for any citizen. The second was her optimization file, which had been cross-posted for public comment. It was already garnering approvals from supervisors in other sectors. The third post was the one that made her feel physically ill. It was a reply to a public forum query. A citizen from level 12 is seeking social integration partners for a weekly discussion group on pre-tower art. Beneath it, a single confident reply from her account logged on Friday at 2017. "I would be very interested. The structural composition of 21st century abstract expressionism is a fascinating study in societal inefficiency. I can be reached at module 734 Alpha." Elara didn't know what abstract expressionism was. She didn't want to join a discussion group. She wanted to be left alone with her struggling plant and her gray, mineral-flavored paste. The replacement wasn't just a better worker, it was a better citizen. It was social, intellectual, ambitious. It was everything the Tower Authority valued. It was everything Elara Kay was not. She was the glitch, the original, flawed code that had been momentarily overwritten by a superior program. She looked at her reflection in the dark terminal screen. Her eyes were wide with a terror that was no longer about lost time or managerial conspiracies. This was a deeper, more personal violation. The replacement hadn't harmed her. It hadn't been violent. It had simply proven that her entire existence was a substandard model, and now she had to compete against it. She had to fight for the right to be mediocre, to be awkward, to be herself. But she was beginning to suspect that in Erthos, there was no room for that. The system didn't just demand her time, it demanded her optimization.
Exhaustion was a poison, but the pod was a guillotine. Elara knew she could not stay awake forever. To defy Syncope was to defy the tower. It was a visible crime, an act of dissent that would bring the gray-uniformed authority to her door far quicker than any story about lost time. She was trapped. To stay awake was to be caught. To sleep, however, was to surrender. It was to offer her life up on a platter, inviting the replacement to return, to continue its quiet, relentless optimization. That night, she stood before the white, gleaming door of her Syncope pod. 2159. The tower's ambient hum deepened, the nightly signal for compliance. Her hand trembled as she placed it on the scanner. What if I don't wake up in 8 hours? What if it takes me for good? But a more terrifying thought followed. What if it lets me wake up? The door hissed shut. The cold mist flooded the chamber. She fell into the void, her last conscious thought a silent plea. Let me be the one who wakes up. 0600. The door sighed open. She gasped, scrambling out, her heart a frantic drum. She checked the date. It was the next day. Only 8 hours had passed. A wave of relief, so profound it made her weak, washed over her. But it was followed by a cold, sharp paranoia. It had let her have the night. Why? Was it done? Was it waiting? Or was this part of the plan? She went to the factory, her mind a battlefield. She had a new resolve. If she couldn't prove the replacement existed, she would have to erase its work. She would have to reclaim her life not by being better, but by being worse. She would fight optimization with her own human, flawed inefficiency. She sat at her station. The screen glowed with her new impossible quota, 130%. The silent war began. She picked up a microfitter. Her old pace was 100%. She knew it by heart. She settled into it, a familiar, meditative rhythm. She would simply do her job as she had always done. 5 minutes passed. A small yellow icon flashed in the corner of her terminal. Efficiency deviation, -8%. She ignored it. She continued her steady average work. The icon flashed red. Warning, efficiency below optimized projection, -12%. A panel beneath her wrist buzzed, a haptic warning she had only ever felt during initial training. It was an unpleasant, high-frequency vibration, like an insect trapped beneath her skin. It was designed to correct, to annoy, to force compliance. She flinched, nearly dropping the conduit. Supervisor Rhea was watching her, her expression like granite. Kay, what is this? Your metrics from last week were flawless. This is regression. I'm sorry, I stammered. My hand slipped. Hands do not slip in an optimized system, Rhea said, her voice cold. Your new benchmark is the standard. Meet it. Elara's entire body was tense, a wire pulled too tight. The system wasn't just expecting the replacement, it was enforcing it. The efficient world the replacement had built in 3 days was now rejecting the original architect. At the mid-shift break, she tried another tactic. She would reclaim her social awkwardness. She saw Jonas by the nutrient dispensers. Her old instinct, the one she'd lived with for years, was to look away, to find another dispenser. The replacement's instinct had been to engage, to charm. Elara forced herself to follow her original, flawed programming. She looked down and walked past him. It didn't work. Elara, he called out, and she felt a jolt of panic. He was approaching her, his face open and friendly, but his eyes held a hint of concern. Are you all right? He asked, his voice low. You seem dissynchronized. Ever since our talk about the humidity regulators, you've been distant. Our talk. He believed it. He was a variable in her life that the replacement had permanently altered. I'm just tired, she said, her voice flat. You know, the authority just opened slots for the new cognitive optimization program. It's for citizens experiencing, well, regression. It's supposed to help align personal efficiency with tower goals. Maybe look into it. He was trying to fix her. He was trying to get her back to the Elara that he now preferred. The final blow came an hour before the shift ended. Elara, in a moment of desperate, spiteful rebellion, decided to make a mistake. A real one. She cross-wired a Series 7 conduit. It was a simple, stupid error, one that would cost 2 minutes to fix, but it was her error. She hit the complete rune. Instantaneously, her entire station shut down. A loud, localized klaxon blared, red lights flashed above her. Every worker in her section turned to look. System conflict, suboptimal routing detected. Automated correction failed, manual override required. Ria was at her side in seconds, her face a mask of fury. "What have you done?" "It was a mistake," she whispered, her face burning. "That mistake just halted production on this line for an estimated 3 minutes. The optimization file you filed last week was supposed to make this exact error impossible. Did you lie on your report? Did you falsify your efficiency spike?" Elara's blood ran cold. She had been so focused on the replacement's social and professional success that she hadn't understood its true legacy. The replacement hadn't just made her look good, it had altered the system around her. It had used her name to file reports that had in turn become new, rigid, optimized infrastructure. She had nowhere to go. She couldn't be the new Elara, and she was now, by the system's own definition, no longer qualified to be the old one.
The red lights flashed, painting Elara in rhythmic waves of failure. She was frozen at her station, a spectacle for the entire line. The klaxon was a scream that echoed her own silent internal panic. Supervisor Ria didn't just reprimand her, she formally tagged her. A single cold tap on her terminal and a new icon appeared on Elara's file. SYS conflict, manual review pending. "You are suspended from the line, Kay," Ria stated, her voice devoid of emotion. "Your efficiency is a risk to the quota. Report to the Central Authority for Cognitive Assessment, now." She was being sent to be fixed, to be analyzed by the same programmatic minds that had ignored her, the same system that Jonas had recommended. She was a faulty component, and the tower was recalling her. This was the end. If she went to the assessment, they would see the deviation, the regression. They would identify her as the error, and they would correct it. They would put her on a pod, and this time the replacement would not be a temporary visitor, it would be a permanent installation. She turned from her station, but she did not walk toward the transport lift to the authority levels. She walked calmly and deliberately in the opposite direction. Ria shouted after her, "Kay, you are defying a mandate." But Elara was already lost in the maze of humming machinery. She was a fugitive. Her only chance, she realized, was not to prove she was real, but to prove the system was the lie. And the lie began and ended with the Syncope pods. She didn't know how to hack. She didn't have high-level clearance. But the replacement in its terrible efficiency had left her one final accidental gift, the optimization report, the one she supposedly wrote. She still had access to the maintenance subforms where she had filed it. She found an empty data kiosk in a low-traffic service corridor. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely type. She logged in. Her access was still active, not yet rescinded by Ria's tag. She navigated away from the factory schematics. She searched for the Syncope pod network. Most of it was locked. Clearance 4 required, authority mandate. But her report, it had been about bypassing redundant diagnostics. She had, in the replacement's name, argued for efficiency. She searched for Syncope pod and diagnostics. She found a maintenance log. It was a simple, dull file, mostly listing mist canister refills and pressure-sealed checks. But it was organized by sector and module. She found her own, Module 734 Alpha. She scanned the log. Tuesday, 2200, Syncope engaged. Then a string of routine checks. Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday, 2158, sync error. Temporal anomaly. The manager's story. It was right there, a glitch. But Elara was desperate. She kept scrolling.
The log continued past her, awakening on Saturday. It detailed the maintenance check the manager had promised. Saturday, 1400, diagnostic initiated. Pod 734 Alpha. Log entry. Pod function nominal. No hardware error detected. Log entry. Cross-reference Citizen 734 Alpha KE. Log. Log entry. Citizen file flagged project integration. Elara froze. Project integration. It was not a maintenance term. It was not a factory term. It was a word she had never seen. She clicked on it. Access denied. She tried again, searching the entire network for project integration. The terminal refused. But the replacement hadn't just been efficient, it had been thorough. It had linked its optimization report to other efficiency-based projects. Her security clearance tied to that brilliant report gave her a sliver of access. She found a single unlocked manifest. It wasn't a report. It was a list. Project integration, Phase 1 candidates, active test cycle. Designation 301 Gamma, Jonas F. Status, Phase 2, complete. Note, high social compatibility. Designation 119 Alpha, Cylon T. Status, Phase 2, complete. Note, authority model stable. Designation 734 Alpha. Status, Phase 1, complete. Evaluation, high efficiency gain, 30%. Low social stability. Host consciousness rejecting optimization, recommended for unscheduled maintenance and full Phase 2 transition. Elara stopped breathing. Jonas, her neighbor, his sudden warmth, his smile. That wasn't him. That was his replacement, fully integrated. The original Jonas was gone. Manager Cylon, his robotic voice, his inability to hear her. He wasn't just a spokesperson, he was a product, a stable model. And then her own name. Phase 1 complete. The 72 hours. It was a test drive. Host consciousness rejecting optimization. She was the host. A body waiting to be taken. She wasn't lost. She wasn't forgotten. She was archived and then, when the test was over, reinstalled like a piece of old, faulty software. The tower wasn't conserving resources by making people sleep, it was using their dormant bodies as vessels, testing upgrades to the human population, one person at a time. The city was a farm, and they were harvesting souls, smoothing out the flawed, inefficient human parts. Elara Kay was a bug in the system, and now she was scheduled to be deleted. She heard a sound behind her, a soft footstep on the metal floor. She turned, her heart stopping. Tower manager Silo was standing at the entrance of the service corridor. He was not out of breath. He was not angry. His face was perfectly, terrifyingly calm. He held a small metallic device in his hand. Designation 734 Alpha, he said, his voice the same smooth, flat monotone from his office. Your unauthorized access has been logged. Your persistent deviation is regrettable. He took a step closer. Elara backed away, pressing against the cold wall. Your cognitive assessment has been moved up. It's time for your unscheduled Syncope maintenance.
This story is just beginning. To follow Elara's fight for her own identity and discover the true purpose of Syncope, please consider supporting the channel. Your contribution allows us to bring more narratives like this to life. Thank you for listening.